Hello, everybody. Welcome to the session on informal settlements, equitable water and sanitation provision. And as I mentioned, informal settlements are low-income areas, how to shape the human right to water. This session will be partly in Spanish, so we kindly ask you to have your headphones around. So welcome, everybody, to the session. My name is Marcela Lopez. I'm leading the Capacity Development Program at the Water Integrity Network, an organization based in Berlin. So we have different speakers. There will be also Ida Hans from Novagos, an engineer without borders in Denmark. We have David Kamau Kuria from Nakuru County from Kenya. We have Rob Fuller from WaterAid, UK. We have Julio Hector Milla from a utility company in Serapal in Lima, Peru. We have Faustina Boachier from the Ghana Water Utility Company. And to conclude, Patrick Misjisi from Ministry of Water and Environment is the umbrella of water and sanitation from Uganda. Okay, so go back. Yeah, so thank you very much for coming today. As I mentioned, the exclusion from access to water and sanitation, exclusion of informal settlements is a highly contested issue in many parts of the world. Residents that don't have access to water, they are forced to pay high water tariffs. They usually have to walk long distances to fetch water, especially affecting women and girls. And they are also affected by acts of corruption. They usually have to pay high price for being connected to the water network. What we want to discuss in this session is explore what different efforts are doing utility companies, water operators, public utilities, and different organizations to extend access to services to low-income areas and informal settlements, and what kind of challenges are they facing on the ground. For this, we have structured this panel or this session in 4 main areas. First of all, we will discuss, we will give an introduction about the key messages that came from the Congress in September 2022 to give a bit of continuity, what came out from the Congress being hosted by the International Water Association. Afterwards, we will discuss issues of land tenure or urban planning, how do we take care of basic public services provision in urban areas when we are dealing with urban planning issues, and how do utility companies address the regulatory and institutional framework. The second theme, or the second area we will discuss, is issues of accountability, transparency, and participation. So we will look at what kind of legal mechanisms are available for residents of low-income areas and informal settlements to hold governments and utility companies accountable. And also we will discuss how different actors use integrity to improve services. The third area we will look is at the issues of affordability, what kind of mechanisms are implemented to provide affordable access to the services, and how utility companies articulate issues of the human right to water and sanitation compared to issues of economic efficiency. How to balance these two objectives. And to finish, we will look at issues of embracing technological development and innovation. So what kind of digital tools or digital technologies available to improve or how utilities, how technology improves or provides opportunities to improve service provision, to increase transparency and accountability, and how low-income residents or residents of informal settlements use these technologies. Yeah, thank you very much for being here, and I will hand over to Suresh Kumar from the International Water Association. Yeah, thanks for being here. You will be moderating the whole session. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Marcela. I have the most difficult task because we are already running behind schedule of 5 minutes to 10 minutes, I think. But yes, without doing much Marcela has already introduced me. I lead the Inclusive Urban Sanitation Initiative of a newly launched initiative of International Water Association. And this initiative is a cross-cutting initiative for making cities more resilient, water-wise, and be prepared for the, in wake of climate change. And we are moving towards, sanitation secures, agenda. So just with these few words, I would like to say that, we have different channels of engagement, and one of the channels is the specialist groups which we have. And one of the specialist groups, in fact, more than one group was involved in a workshop, and as a result of which there have been some discussions going on, and this session is an outcome of that. But with this brief, I would like to move on to the first speaker for opening remarks, Edda Holm Ollison, Engineers Without Borders, Denmark. Hella, you can take the floor, and I would. Okay, please.
Thank you, Suresh. I'd like to thank the organizers for this opportunity to pass on the key messages from the workshop on WASH held in September. The workshop included keynotes from UN Habitat, represented by Hezekiah Pire. I don't know if you're here, but I've seen you at the Congress. You're there. Who also, and he gave a keynote, as well as the organization Slum Dwellers International. They also gave a keynote representing the inhabitants of the urban informal settlements themselves. Also, 5 of the specialist groups that Suresh mentioned from the International Water Association gave brief technical expert presentations as a precursor of the workshop discussions, and they are the specialist groups listed here. There are 3 key messages I feel are very important to pass on to this WOPA Congress. First and foremost, the challenges connected to WASH in urban informal settlements are essentially challenges of urban governance. The intersectorial planning is lacking, and economic planning often takes priority over spatial planning. Thus, integrated water resource management is a distant dream, and action is urgent, as the least developed countries have a rising proportion of their population living in urban informal settlements. When doing interventions, it's crucially paramount to establish and maintain local ownership. It's very important that this ownership is maintained through the entire process of planning, implementing, and also maintaining WASH facilities in the informal settlements. Significant pools of knowledge and data already exist, and there's a huge potential for accelerating improvements by bridging the gaps between these pools. With regard to urban governance, UN Habitat provided a number of valuable insights. Urban policies and legislation in LDCs rarely prioritize WASH, and often there's a lack of a citywide WASH service vision, especially one that includes the informal settlements. The utilities often operate in environments where full cost recovery is not feasible, and in combination with a low government expenditure on WASH, the result is a huge financing gap. Lack of clarity in the roles, the mandates, the responsibilities, and relationships among national and subnational institutions spread the responsibilities for the different elements of the urban water cycle across a wide range of organizations. And on top of that, most public water utilities in LDCs suffer from a wide range of interrelated institutional weaknesses. Last but not least, there's a lack of adequate data to guide decision-making on service delivery, on investments, on regulation, planning, and accountability. The rather sad conclusion is that the urban development sector in LDCs seldom appreciates the critical role of WASH in improving public health and eradicating poverty and inequality in human settlements and cities. From the inhabitants of the urban informal settlements themselves, we have this powerful message: don't talk about us without us. This seems reasonable. They are, after all, the ones paying too much for overpriced water in jerry cans and left with drainage ditches as toilets, shown at the picture here. SDI emphasized the importance of including the community from the beginning of the process and to invest the time and indeed the patience needed for reaching consensus among representatives of the various subgroups, whether they are based on family relations, religious, or other cultural backgrounds. Use of local workforce and materials will significantly support the local capability of maintenance and long-term sustainability of the wash facilities, and that was also a message that was very important for SDI to communicate. In their experience, it's very much advisable to invite representatives from neighboring communities to follow the process of an intervention, as this will support the dissemination of the good ideas and, of course, contribute to the much-needed acceleration of improvements. They usually work with 4 partner communities when they work with an intervention in one community. A lot of efforts have already been done, and considerable pools of knowledge and data already exist. These are just examples. By sharing and disseminating this knowledge, we can accelerate improvements. And our small contribution to this is a workshop summary report freely available online, and here you can find a library of links to relevant knowledge. And now is the time to find your phone, because these QR codes, they will take you to the workshop summary report and to the workshop presentations. I would like to conclude these opening remarks by thanking the contributors of the IWA workshop. They are listed here. And also thank you for your attention. I look forward to the further discussions.
Thank you, Ella. Thanks for the opening remarks and setting the context and how we have engaged this in the IWA's Specialist Group workshop. And building on the discussions, we would like to move on with the first speaker of today's session on land tenure and urban planning. And I would like to invite David Kameo Kuria. David, if you can join us. David is the Chief Officer, Housing and Urban Development, County Government of Nakura, and a member of all municipal boards in Nakura, including Nevasa, Gilgil, Molo, Nazoro, Mau Narok, and all urban center, and he's the country coordinator for the Kenya Informal Settlement Investment Program. So, David, the floor is yours.
Thank you. This is next. Thank you. Good afternoon. I think, thanks for the introduction, Suresh. My name is Kuria David, in charge of housing and urbanization, the county government of Nakuru, which is one of the states in 47 states within Kenya. I will be more addressing on the what then do we need to do, particularly from the perspectives of urban planning. I'm an architect by profession and in charge of the urbanization and the planning for the same. And I think one of the key contributions, and it's good what we have heard from yesterday, in terms of the intervention and the great work the utilities are doing and the support they are getting, is then why this problem still remains the last 45 years, and it's still growing. Now, the perspective we are taking as a government, it includes the actual planning, and that's where the disconnect between the interventions that have been there over time and the current scenarios. Now, most of the interventions, and I must admit from several governments within Africa, is that we are actually driven by the economic planning. And that has been the biggest challenge over time, instead of being driven by the spatial planning. And so what do we end up with? You know, most of the utilities seated here are actually firefighting. They're actually following the development. The slums are growing, they are behind following the planning. And I think the whole idea is then how do we turn these where we plan the future and make the interventions more viable and more economical. So I'll just give a glimpse of what we are doing in Nakuru. Nakuru County is number 2 in terms of the population and largest county in Kenya. With, as mentioned here, in terms of urbanization, which is my biggest concern now, how to stem it in terms of development and ensure that planning and development go together. I'm currently running one city, which is the 4th largest city in Kenya, and 6 municipalities. We have 6 townships within the county and 120 market centers. So the whole idea, again, is that most of the focus, when we sit here, if you talk about Uganda, most likely you'll be talking about Kampala. If you talk about Kenya, you'll be talking about Nairobi. So what we are doing is to diffuse and start strategic planning for the 120 market centers. Because in the next 50 years, there will be the municipalities. To avoid a scenario where we have the Nakuru city with slums, we would want to avoid the scenario of the 120 market centers in 30 years being slum municipalities. That's the Nakuru. And the strategy, particularly for the new government, has been that, yes, we realize the problem has been there. Can we be able to regenerate our cities? So the first thing we have done is to develop regeneration strategies for all the city and the municipality in terms of how do we want them to function. And that's, again, led by the spatial plan of the growth pattern in the next 20, 25 years. And that's the Vision 2050 that we are working for our cities. Under this component, we are looking at the long-term plan, again, to avoid firefighting instances. The 2050, that's the next 20 plus years. Designing for people, I think that's important, and also creating integrated systems and networks. Optimizing land use. Whatever we are talking here, whether it's laying pipes, it's about land use. Whether we are talking about human settlement, the informal settlement, it's all about land use. Then how do we optimize our land use? And going down the issues of integrating economic development and promoting diversities in our cities. Now, under the regeneration strategy, we are taking settlement by settlement, apart from the overall spatial planning, and start saying, what is it that we need in this settlement to regenerate, including the actual planning, whether it's access, the water utility, the sewer system, the waste management, and what is that renewed vigor that we want. So what we are doing, this is a very old settlement, about 50 plus years ago. So what we are doing is regenerating that estate. And we are taking all the estates, particularly the informal settlements of within our city and the 6 municipalities, and coming up with pure and forward thinking in terms of regenerating. Again, our vision is to ensure that all the municipalities have a 2050 strategy in terms of growth. So this is one of it, the Flamingo Estate, and we are doing that across the entire city and municipality. Climate change is real, and these are the issues we have to confront when we are talking about radiuses. Now, this is, again, within the city of Nakuru. That's the Lake Nakuru, which is, I don't know whether it's overgrowing its boundaries or trying to grab our city. That's what the lake is literally doing. You can see this is already a human settlement that has been grabbed and taken over by the lake. And these are real things when we start talking climate change and what actually do we need to do. If the lake is eating into the city, then the issue of land use need to be rethought. We need to seriously sit down and rethink the land use. Part of the rethinking, there are some few things, interventions we have done. Again, in the informal settlement particularly, and that is trying to come up with the ideal scenario and providing hard washing systems. This we have already piloted in some parts of the informal settlements with the support of the UN Habitat and FES Germany. And again, we are looking at that ideal 2050 slums growth, where we come to Nakuru, after 20, 30 years, they are no longer slums. Again, the challenges of regeneration. the waste management, again, has taken some of our prime locations in terms of dumping, and we are saying this is a disaster that we need to confront in terms of land use planning, and we need to provide the answers. How best do we deal with waste? Again, we have come up with a strategic plan in terms of zoning, in terms of enforcement of the building codes and regulation, in terms of implementation of these plans, and we have developed a comprehensive disaster risk management plan for all the cities, the city and the municipality. Catalytic project, as we do the plans, we're also saying that our people want to see what is in that plan. The plans most likely will be some several billion-dollar interventions. We don't have that now. So what we are doing, again with the support of the UN Habitat, FES, and other partners, is that we have decided that in every settlement we are stepping in, we need to do catalytic projects. And this will be a mix of technologies that will help us solve a long-term problem and coming up with a long-term strategy to address the regeneration. Some of these things have been done, including emptying and planning for that, production of the Maca.com by one of our utilities in Nakuru, that's the Nakuru Water Nawasco, which is producing from the sludge the charcoal briquettes, and now they are able to put that to the shelves within the supermarket. So it's a whole framework and long term, from technology, from a problem to solution, technology solution, to the market scenario and the economics. Sure. I'm actually summarizing. Yes, and I'm just concluding with Africans. We are full of parables and sayings. And by the time you are concluding, most likely there is one or two you have dropped on the line. Do not throw away your water simply because you heard it will be raining tomorrow or today. So keep it. And let's keep the momentum. It's doable. The whole issue of sanitation and safe water is actually doable, whether it's in the informal settlement, but the paradigm need to change from economic perspective, where we are just having the money as a kit and start planning for the money. Let's plan for the space and utilize the space the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for giving an overview of how urban development and sanitation interlinks. Thank you. I would move on to the next speaker, and we have two speakers, and in that sequence, I have been asked to call upon first Julio Hector Milia Altabas from Lima Water Utility Company. Are you ready? And after that, this presentation, Rob will join. So 10 minutes, Julio would present, and just to give you a brief about Julio, Julio is the head of the regulatory compliance and institutional integrity team at the Lima Water Utility Company. And he is the lawyer by training and holds a master's in criminal sciences and specializations in prohibitive techniques. Floor to you, Julio. Okay. And if you can summarize in 10 minutes here, and then follow this talk.
Bien. Buenas tardes con todos. Soy Julio Milla Altabás, jefe del equipo de cumplimiento normativo e integridad institucional de SEDAPAL en Lima, Perú. Y en esta oportunidad me toca tratar un tema muy especial y de mucha convulsión social, que es la gestión de integridad aplicada a la distribución gratuita de agua potable con camiones cisternas en zonas no administradas, es decir, en zonas donde no llega el servicio de agua de red, ¿no? ¿Cuál es el contexto hídrico que Lima presenta en esta gestión de la integridad de la distribución gratuita de agua potable? Pues básicamente SEDAPAL tiene el encargo de llevar el servicio de agua potable y alcantarillado a 11 millones de personas que habitan en Lima y Callao. Las principales fuentes hídricas son las cuencas de los ríos Rímac, Lurín y Chillón, siendo la del río Rímac la más representativa, con un 80% de recurso hídrico para su potabilización. Nosotros en Lima presentamos un estrés hídrico muy marcado. De hecho, Lima es un desierto prácticamente y tenemos una escasez de agua y sumada pues a la mayor demanda que se presenta año tras año por un crecimiento poblacional que no está siendo controlado adecuadamente. Además de esto, tenemos un problema de contaminación. De hecho, el río Rímac, que es nuestra principal fuente hídrica, como ya les había mencionado, tiene o presenta residuos mineros, relaves mineros, que contaminan esta fuente, además de conexiones clandestinas de desagüe, que están directamente o descargan directamente en esta fuente que es el río Rímac. Nosotros tenemos actualmente un 92% de cobertura, siendo equivalente a 10 millones de usuarios que cuentan con agua de red. La brecha de más o menos 1 millón de usuarios o posibles usuarios es lo que quiere atender este programa de distribución gratuita con agua potable, ¿no? Bueno, puse la pandemia del COVID-19 como una situación también dentro del contexto porque afectó en muchos ámbitos y también en del abastecimiento de agua. Bien, el objetivo como ya les había adelantado, de este programa de distribución de agua potable con camiones cisterna es poder llegar a la población más vulnerable de Lima con el servicio de agua potable y básicamente esto estaba siendo financiado por el Ministerio de Economía y Finanzas y a través del Ministerio de Vivienda en Perú. Nos trasladaban recursos públicos para poder hacer realidad este programa. La cadena logística estaba distribuida básicamente con los actores siguientes: Sedapal, que se encargaba de la potabilización y el suministro de agua potable; los camiones cisternas, que se encargaban de transportar el agua potable y llevarla y entregarla a la población más vulnerable; las autoridades locales, que eran los municipios. Básicamente su función era de empadronar a los beneficiarios y de fiscalizar o controlar la correcta entrega del recurso; y las comunidades, que nos daban las facilidades para poder ingresar a las distintas arterias de las ciudades y poder entregar el recurso. El tipo de contrato era un contrato especial, una contratación directa, es decir, no estaba sujeta a un proceso de contratación pública, y el costo total del proyecto hasta la fecha es de 89 millones de dólares aproximadamente. Como parte de la gestión de integridad, nosotros encontramos una falla grave de integridad que afectaba el objeto de este programa, que era básicamente social, y era la venta no autorizada de este líquido elemento a establecimientos privados o a usuarios privados que no estaban dentro del padrón de beneficiarios. Es decir, nos encontramos con varios casos de corrupción. Esto incluso fue materia de una noticia en un programa periodístico que está ahí, una captura de pantalla, que se titulaba Corrupción a chorros. Y bueno, y como pueden ver en la siguiente imagen, es un camión cisterna del programa que está llenando una piscina privada en una zona que está comprendida dentro del programa, ¿no? Aquí básicamente los actores eran pues los dueños de los camiones cisterna, los conductores de estos camiones, los supervisores de parte de Sedapal y las localidades o las autoridades locales que todos no cumplieron con una adecuada labor. Las causas fueron la no supervisión o la cadena de custodia de la entrega de este líquido elemento, una decadencia o ausencia de ética de parte de los actores que ya mencioné, y que, bueno, se sentía como una práctica normalizada o una sensación de impunidad realizar este tipo de comportamientos, como que no existía un control claro. Los efectos básicamente eran una afectación a los derechos y al acceso al servicio de la población más vulnerable y la pérdida o desvío de recursos. Como parte del trabajo que hicimos con WIN en CEDAPAL, logramos aplicar una caja de herramientas para solucionar esta problemática que básicamente incluía una serie de acciones estratégicas. Como pueden ver, se trató o se incluyó en el contrato y luego en el servicio mismo la colocación de dispositivos GPS en cada uno de los camiones para poder monitorear el recorrido adecuadamente. Además, se logró insertar una aplicación, una app, que además de medir el recorrido en tiempo real de los camiones cisterna, también permitía cargar fotografías de cada entrega que se hacía de este recurso como medio de verificación. Además, utilizamos una plataforma pública que era la plataforma de debida diligencia, que nos permitía tener información acerca de los antecedentes, los posibles antecedentes delictivos que podían tener los dueños de los camiones y los conductores de estos camiones, para poder de esa manera también saber con quién nos relacionábamos y a quién contratábamos para este servicio, ¿no? Luego tuvimos que implementar una política de rotación de personal de los supervisores para poder evitar estos fallos de integridad, la instalación de videos vigilancia en cada uno de los puntos de los surtidores de estos camiones y aplicar de manera definitiva y adecuada las sanciones y las penalidades y acciones legales que podían presentarse luego de que ocurriesen estos casos de corrupción. Finalmente, como resultado de la aplicación de este programa, de esta caja de herramientas, tuvimos que se mejoró el flujo del proceso, el control, sobre todo en el flujo del proceso. Logramos anticipar varios casos de irregularidades de corrupción. Además, tuvimos un mejor sustento o una mejor documentación de la aplicación de penalidades, lo cual no existía hasta antes de aplicar estas cajas de herramientas. Se redujo el índice o la casuística de corrupción en este programa. Logramos mitigar el riesgo de integridad y los efectos que podían tener como un efecto económico o reputacional para la empresa, para CEDAPAL. Y bueno, y se logró asegurar el objetivo social, que era el principal objetivo que tenía este programa y que se veía afectado con estas desviaciones del recurso. Para finalizar, solo quiero señalar una frase de William Thomson Kelvin, que es: lo que no se mide no se puede mejorar y lo que no se mejora se degrada siempre. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Julio, for this short presentation about experiences from Peru. And now I would like to invite Rob Fuller. Rob is a utility management specialist with over 25 years of experience, and he has a dual role at WaterAid as a global water sector advisor and a senior urban wash manager. And he would be talking to us about accountability, transparency, and participation.
Thanks, Suresh. Good afternoon, everyone. I've only got one slide, and I've only got 3 points on it, so I'm going to take no more than 5 minutes of your time. So even if you know everything I'm going to say, I'm only going to have wasted a maximum of 5 minutes of your time this afternoon. You'll be relieved to hear. Firstly, I'm from WaterAid, as Suresh has already said. For those that don't know, hopefully you all do know, but WaterAid is a large international NGO, non-governmental organisation, focusing solely on water, sanitation and hygiene, and specifically on reaching those essential services to the poorest and most marginalised people in society. We've been in existence for over 40 years now, so we've done a lot of work and we've learned a lot of things, and we currently work in about 30 countries globally. because we focus on the poorest and most marginalised people, we understand that accountability is an absolutely critical part of delivering services to those people, and things like the human rights approaches, we've been a champion of that for a very long time, and accountability and integrity. So it's very much a key part of what we do in everything we do. What I'm going to present is just 3 learnings from those 40 years around those topics, particularly around accountability. This is also in concert with my colleague Puneet Srivastava, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, but I want to acknowledge Puneet's role in this as well. So one of the things that WaterAid has learnt, and many other agencies have learnt through painful experience, is that just building stuff doesn't work. So an infrastructure-led approach to any sort of service delivery, but particularly in informal settlements, you are wasting your money, because it will stop working fairly quickly. It will fall into disrepair. And what we've come to learn, like I say, over the last 40 years, but particularly over the last 5 years, and now in our new strategy, which we're just finalising the operationalisation of, apologies to the translators for that word, sustainability only comes through having a functioning, healthy WASH system. WASH is water, sanitation and hygiene, just to be clear. And that's not system as in a network or a set of pipes and taps. It's much more than that. So when I talk about a system, and hopefully when you talk about a system, or you do after this session, we mean everything that is needed in order to deliver sustainable services into perpetuity. So that is all the actors, all the institutions, all the actors, all the factors, and all the interrelations between all of those things that make the system work. So our first lesson is you can only do this if you take a systems thinking mindset and a systems thinking approach. And I know, having worked in utility for a long time myself, that isn't necessarily a way utilities historically have thought, but it is a way that particularly service providers and all the other agencies need to think now. The other key word in there is services. So everything we talk about now is about delivering services, not about delivering infrastructure, so services. And we talk a lot about what we call management models, and maybe we can pick that up in the next thing. So that's lesson 1. Lesson 2, specifically on accountability is not a switch you turn on overnight. It's not one thing you can do and suddenly everything is accountable. Accountability is, I've called it an emergent function, but essentially accountability is something that is a symptom of a healthy system. And if you see there isn't accountability, or there are failures or weaknesses in accountability, that's an indication something's not right in your system. So, but it's not just something you do. We don't just decide to be accountable. There isn't one intervention we can do that suddenly delivers an accountability to particularly the poorest and most marginalised people. So that's point number 2. The good news is that if you take a systems thinking approach and understand that accountability should flow throughout that system, what that means is you can build accountability through a systems strengthening approach, accountability. And in turn, that means there's a whole bunch of different entry points and different approaches and different interventions you can take that start to build accountability into the system in an incremental fashion. So again, it's not something you can do overnight. It's something that takes years and years and years and builds and builds and builds and can go backwards. And clearly some of those things you can do are the things we traditionally recognise for accountability and integrity. They're the formal approaches. Who are the institutions? What are their jobs? Do they know their jobs? Are those institutions coordinated? Are the laws, the policies, the regulatory structures in place? Do we have really dull stuff like engineering standards? And are we checking them? Are there incentives and penalties? All that kind of stuff. Is that in place? And that's stuff we traditionally focus on when we talk about accountability. Then we talk a little bit about data, and data's been mentioned quite a lot today in a number of the sessions, and I think it's really key. But again, data is not just about quantifiable stuff about your system and KPIs. Data is also about who are the customers, where are the customers, what are their needs, what are they feeling? That's data, that's information, that data that becomes information that you can utilise in building accountability into the system. I think we heard it in this morning's plenary from the Special Rapporteur and others. Leadership is absolutely critical in building a culture, and ultimately these things are cultural, of accountability. And that's not just political leadership, that's leadership throughout the system. Leadership at the politicians, but also within the service providers and in the communities as well. This is a two-way thing. This isn't accountability flowing from some imagined top-level thing. But the real focus, and this is the hardest bit, but it's also the most transformational. Where does power lie within that system? How can we resolve power indifferences? What are the norms and behaviours? You know, there are cultural, like I say, there are cultural aspects to accountability as well that have to be taken into account. And that's really tough work. It takes time. But that I think, when you start to really drill down into that stuff, that's when you get the biggest shifts. Suresh is looking at his watch. I'm going to stop. Happy to discuss more in the next thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. We are just 17 minutes of our slides, so just trying to do timekeeping also. But I think I would like to move on to the next speaker. Faustina Boki, water affordability is her topic, and I would like to briefly introduce about Faustina. She works with Ghana Water Company, GWCL, the utility responsible for supplying water to urban areas in Ghana. She's the Chief Manager of Low Incomes Customer Support Department. So, Faustina, the floor is yours. If you can try to do it 10 minutes. Okay. You have to use this to forward.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, so I was testing the use of the equipment. So the point has already been made today that people who live in the low-income urban areas and depend on secondary and tertiary service providers spend a higher proportion of their income to pay for water. Water utilities usually cite the lack of space, high non-revenue water in these areas, the fact that the perception that low-income residents will not be able to pay monthly water bill, and also the perception that they are difficult customers as reasons to avoid extending the network to these places. In this presentation that I have titled The Path to Affordable Water Access, I will show how JWCL, as a water utility, has tried to balance financial and human rights concerns to water to make it affordable for low-income householders to also enjoy quality water services. So as a water utility, we have shown over the past few years that we are committed to achieving SDG 6 to ensure sustainable access to water and even sanitation, because in my department, when we are working in schools, in health centers, and public spaces, we don't only extend the water connection, but we also make sure that toilets are constructed. We have constructed toilets together with Water for Life, with UNICEF, and with UN Habitat in several low-income urban communities and schools. And I have already talked about it, about Ghana Water. We are an urban water utility responsible for about 60% of towns and cities in Ghana. Whenever a city's population exceeds 5,000, then that city will be the mandate of JWCL to supply service. Currently, we serve 77% of the close to 19 million urban residents. But challenges remain in the low-income urban communities. The first challenge is that the distribution network has not been extended to these areas, and even where the distribution network exists, you find that most residents are not able to connect onto the network because of the high upfront new service connection fee. So as a utility, we have decided to move away from the perception and look at what can we do to ensure that the poor also enjoy quality service. So the old perception that the poor cannot pay is not true. The poor are already paying for services. They even pay more. And so in JWCL, we looked at a WhatsApp-supported study which showed that the poor in the LIUCs pay 10 times more than the JWCL-approved tariff, and that they are willing and able to pay for reliable water services. But then barriers exist. Barriers like their inability to pay the new service connection fee, barriers relating to bring your site plan, apply for the connection, when we will come to your house to take the measurement, and it takes weeks before utility staff follow up on these things. So WhatsApp recommended that utilities should establish a dedicated unit to serve the poor, to focus on service provision to the poor. And at that time, Ghana Water was already working with AVRL then from Veteran Services International. And we had a pro-poor water service manager, but with her support, we undertook all these studies together with WhatsApp, and then JWCL took action, albeit with a lot of hesitation, but there was a lot of push from veterans then, from WhatsApp, and also from myself. Yes, we pushed management to get it done. So the unit was formed. And then the World Bank came in to support us to deliver the first project, to deliver what we call the subsidized water connection projects, with a target of about 3,000. When we completed the project in 2 years, we had connected more than 10,000 households, so we exceeded the target. So with the Gamma project, a subsidized water connection model was established, and we don't only give subsidies. Currently, we are giving 75% subsidies, but when we started, we said it is a commitment fee because most residents did not believe that Ghana Water will come to the community and tell them to connect to water at a very low rate. So they said, well, let's watch and see if it will happen. So when we started, we just charged a minimum fee. We called it a commitment fee, 200 Ghana cedis. It was oversubscribed, but we made sure to engage the community. So utility staff will move into beneficiary areas wearing our T-shirts. We are here to give you a water connection. And they were looking at us. So we actually also looked at community systems. So we just don't enter the community. We go through the municipal assembly, then to traditional leadership, and then to assembly members within the community, meet opinion leaders, churches, mosques, before we meet the wider community. So a lot of debates were held. But even before the debates and forums, key informant interviews and others to allow us to understand community dynamics, we undertook a lot of surveys, baseline surveys, which gave us a lot of information about the community, their specific needs, what their aspirations are, and all of that. And then we also engaged them. We gave 75% off after the model had been established and communities showed a lot of interest. Now we are giving 75% of, we revise it depending on the dynamics in a particular community. When we move up north, where income levels are really low, and we have majority of residents living below the poverty line, we don't give 75% off. In those cases, we give it out almost free, but then we make them pay a commitment fee to show that when the bills are delivered, it will be paid. So we are revising the model. And then we have combined the subsidies with other procedures to ensure that we make it very easy and accessible for our residents. So we move into the community, we set up mobile offices. In there, we can set up a table under a tree or in a school. Then residents will just come and register. You don't have to walk to a JWCO office. You come, you register. We send staff to come and take the measurements. We prepare the estimates. Then you just pay the necessary fee. We bring all our materials. We engage private service providers to do the trenching. The pipelines are laid. So all you do is to just approach us, pay your fee, and then the connection is done. We have also removed other requirements, like bring a site plan. We will not accept this site plan. You know, we have removed all of that. And then our community engagement processes has also enabled us to establish water user associations in the communities. So the water user associations, as you can see, some of them wearing blue T-shirts, they support us in the service delivery process and also facilitate the process for their neighbors to get connections easily. Sometimes, utility staff, they may want to, it's supposed to be a first come, first serve basis, but they may want, when they have friends within the community, they want to serve them first. But the water user associations are there to check all of that. And they also help enhance our feedback mechanisms within the community. So we have scaled up. We started with 10,000 connections. Waterworks came in, supported with another, how many connections? Another 5,000 connections. UN Habitat came in, supported, I'll go to the details later. But we have actually scaled up and has widened our network beyond the World Bank. Now UNICEF has come in to support, Waterworks, the Red Cross, and even the regulator in Ghana, the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, is also supporting our effort. And the PURC has even established a proper working group where we play a major role to ensure that the water service needs of poor people are met in Ghana. Yes, so this is the slide. So under Gamma, we started with 10,000. Now we have reached 15,000 because we exceeded the connection under the first phase. The World Bank gave us additional funding to connect another 10,000 customers. And in less than 8 months, we have connected 5,000 more customers. We have moved beyond Greater Accra. Now we are in Greater Kumasi. And most of our beneficiaries are excited. They are happy with the initiative. You can see a woman smiling, washing her clothes in the comfort of her house. And you see, you don't need any plumbing system in your house. We just fix it on the wall of your household and you are good to go. So Waterworks too, we have made 5,000 connections benefiting more than 92,000 people, because when you move into these areas, you find that more than one household depend on the connection. In some cases, you have as many as 22 people dependent on a single connection. And UNICEF, in a space of 12 months, we connected 1,500 households. We have connected several schools, health centers, public spaces like market areas, lorry parks, to water and sanitation services. We have met about 85,000 people, and with UN Habitat, we were supported to do a small project in a high density area with 200 connections, and we have been able to meet the needs of 3,000 households. So we are improving the quality of life of people, moving them from fetching water, carrying water on their heads, to now just opening the tap and water flowing for them. So we want to reach a stage where we are self-sufficient financially. Currently, we depend mainly on external financing, but the contributions that households make towards their water connection is put into a revolving fund. And with this fund, we are able to buy additional pipes and fittings to connect more households. I give the example of the first project we did with Waterworks in a low-income community in Accra. We call it the Okotabanman. This was a community in central Accra. The transmission means was passing, just lying along the streets of the community, but nobody had water. With support from Waterworks, we extended the network with about 12 kilometers, and we had initial funding to connect 200 households. But using the revolving fund approach, now we have connected more than 1,300 houses within the area. When you enter there, you see a meter in almost every house. So I always say that we are reaching wash-friendly communities where you enter a community and every house has access to water. We even constructed a standpipe there, but everybody has water. Who wants to go and pay to a vendor to fetch? Yes. So that is where we are going. And we are also advocating for the PURC to also increase the tariff, even if tariffs are increased by 2%, and this 2% is put into proper water service delivery, we should be able to achieve full cost recovery and connect every household for free in urban water services. So that is what we are doing. We have this slide highlights our use of technology to make it easy for householders to pay their water bill without having to go to a JWCL office. So they can also make more frequent payments. You know, we are trying to move them from postpaid to prepaid to prepaid. And so once you receive your bill, you can just pay it in the comfort of your home. And then we are crowning it all. We have learned a lot from our partners. They has helped us to professionalize our department. And so we are also working with Guma Valley Water through a water operator partnership where JWCL is the lead partner, and now Guma is the support, the mentee, and then they is also supporting us to see how we can make the unserved visible to be served in a special way. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Faustina. May I now call upon the next speaker, Patrick Kaizi. He's a civil engineer by training, and he's the cluster manager with Ministry of Water and Environment, Eastern umbrella of water and sanitation, overseeing operation and maintenance of 20 piped water systems, and also the EU WOPs project lead for Eastern umbrella. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a pleasure being here this afternoon. Good afternoon, you. My introduction has been done. I will not go into that. And I'm here to share the experience of Ministry of Water and Environment, looking at the case study of Eastern Umbrella of Water and Sanitation, what we've been able to do in extending piped water services to the low-income communities. When you talk about Uganda and water supply, many people's minds go straight to national water. And I must say that we've done well when it comes to big urban cities. That is where national water is working. But when it comes to the rural communities, it is the responsibility of Ministry of Water and Environment that has the overall mandate of extending water to all, both urban and rural communities. And with this, it has been able to support 2 regional water utilities that operate in the low-income communities to be able to participate in 2 partnerships in a quest to the SDG 6. Specifically for this presentation, I will concentrate on the partnership we are having with Welsh Water and Water Aid that is supporting 3 pipe water schemes to make them model schemes that will be benchmarking grounds for best practices in operation and maintenance in the eastern region and in the entire Uganda. Focusing on the reasons as to why Ministry of Water and Environment has been able to evolve over and over and again, it's been basically 2 major items. One is the operationalization of the community-based practices for the operation and maintenance of piped water systems. Over 1,200 piped water systems in rural communities have been constructed and handed over to rural communities, but it has come it has been established that most of these piped water systems break prematurely simply because most of these communities are not having enough capacity to effectively operate these systems. And with that, also focusing on the issue of public tap stands that have been provided for the low-income communities, it's earlier perceived that affordable water can be accessed at the public standposts, but the operators of those public standposts tend to overcharge these customers, and also looking at the convenience of the users. Because if you're looking at transformation of a community and you're trying to extend services for them to be able to get transformed, it implies that they reach a certain time where they feel that the option that you gave them is no longer sustainable. So what has the Ministry of Water and Environment done? Looking at the national level and focusing on the rural communities, the ministry has established 6 regional water utilities that support operation and maintenance of piped water systems in rural and in small towns, rural growth centers, and then rural communities. And with that, it has been able to streamline the activities countrywide, whereby it's been able to establish a universal billing system that is web-based, also revenue mobilization system that is web-based, and also looking at the universal reporting system that is also web-based. If each one of us logs onto the Ministry of Water and Environment website, you can be able to access data that is on time for operation and maintenance of these systems. And also, lastly, looking at the regulation, it has formulated performance contracts for these regional water utilities, which is monitored on a monthly, quarterly, and then they are renewed after 3 years. Then going on to the regional level, where these umbrellas are based, I will speak specifically for the Eastern umbrella, where I come from. For us to be able to evolve and then be able to extend these services in the areas we anticipate to extend, we are required to strengthen our partnership with development partners and all other partners. And through that, we are able to work closely with them and then be able to foster innovation and at the same time also development. Because some of these innovations are not, when you look at the return on investment, they are not positively contributing to revenue mobilization. So we use our partners to be able to do that. Also, looking at also the low-income communities, having expressed the willingness to pay for water supply services, because at the public standpoint, they pay cash, implying that if we give them affordable services in terms of payment for water, then for connection fees, and at the same time also giving them flexible avenues for payment, they've shown that willingness that they are able to pay for water. And looking at the schemes that we operate that are located in rural communities and small towns, the geographical area of Uganda is diverse. There are some areas that are dry. We have some mountainous areas where water just flows by gravity, implying that we cannot apply a common tariff for all those beneficiaries. So we have scheme-specific tariff structures we've developed with the communities such that we are able to meet the operation and maintenance expenses for those schemes. Then most of us have been speaking about data and how it can be utilized to inform effective and sustainable management of piped water systems. Yeah, we've adopted the M-Water with the support of WaterAid and Welsh Water. We've been able to collect data, and we are using it for asset management and also mapping out areas where these low-income communities are located, so that we can equitably extend water supply services to these areas. Then also the usage of water safety plans, because for us to be able to engage effectively with the communities, we vest our guidance on the water safety plans to guide on discussions with communities, at the same time also to support in strategic planning, and then being able to manage our risks and know where to invest, and also looking at the turnovers in terms of extension of service delivery to the target communities. Then lastly, the issue of accountability. Low-income communities also have challenges. When you extend water, a private upstand to a private household, that implies that there will be some challenges, and these people need to communicate to our offices to let us know so that we can support them. So we have established a toll-free line with a call center where all challenges are directed, and our team in the call center is able to call the field staff to be able to address those challenges. For the so many interventions that we've been able to make, I must mention that the coverage of Eastern Umbrella is 34 districts, and in that we've been able to extend water supply services to over 597,000 people. In terms of operation, that's how we've been able to grow our production to over 122 million liters of water. And we've been also able to drop down our non-revenue at just 28. And this has also supported us to grow our pipe network, as well as the number of connections. But focusing specifically on the contribution of the EPICS project, where I mentioned of the 3 schemes that where we are doing this project, for those 3 schemes, we had a target of extending pipe water services for both the pro-urban and then the rural poor. Those are, and we set targets for the different schemes depending on their availability of water resources, and you can clearly see that as the number of connections grow, from the time we started the project just into 1 year, we've almost doubled or tripled in some connections. And looking at also the number of pipe network, the length of pipe network laid, it's it's directly communicating to the number of connections that have been laid, that have been established. Yeah, for us to be able to effectively implement these WOPs, we've been having joint interactions with our partners, that is Welsh Water, WaterAid. We've had online meetings. We've also had exchange visits to benchmark, because for what we are benchmarking on from Welsh Water, they also had to come to Uganda to see whether whatever information we are trying to tailor or interventions we are trying to tailor can fit well in the geographical areas. Then those are some of the hands-on experiences from colleagues, and some of the data that has been collected from Namutumba as extracted from M-Water, and SAMLED is also doing socioeconomic household survey that has helped us to map out low-income communities. Yeah, I must take this opportunity to extend my gratitude to our sponsors, that is the European Union, UN Habitat, and also to the partners. We are running the EU WOPs that is focusing on enhancing performance for improved customer satisfaction. That is, I must in a special way recognize the presence of the representative of Welsh Water, that is Madam Kate. Then we have also the representation from WaterAid, that is Dr. Rob. Also from central government, because they are the ones that derive these policies. I must also recognize the presence of the Assistant Commissioner in charge of utility support for the rural communities, that is Engineer Nwamanya, together with the team that he has come with, the umbrella coordinator, that is Engineer Moses, as well as Engineer Mark, who is also supporting the team. And also for all of you who have been able to participate here, because it's quite a large crowd, implying that whatever we are tackling now is the real issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick, for giving us an overview of the excellent work, what you're doing. I have 10 minutes with me, and we have a panel discussion which we have to do. May I call upon the speakers over here? I will ask David to join, Rob, Julio, Faustina, and Patrick, if you can come. And we want to see as much as possible we can take out from this session, the key messages. If you can come over here, join us. Please, sorry, I forgot. Yeah, you can. Hida, you can also join. Yeah. Okay. As my panelists are settling in, I would like to open the panel discussion with, two key questions which are emerging from today's discussions. And one of the basic question is that who is responsible to address the basic right of drinking water and sanitation for those living in low-income areas and informal settlements? So maybe I would ask David. I know I'm doing this question. So would you, David, tell us that who is responsible? Basic right of drinking water and sanitation in low and medium income settlements and informal settlements. So what do you think about it?
Thanks, Raj. I strongly, yes, believe that apart from saying all of us are responsible, but it's a cardinal role of any government to provide services to its citizen. So at the bigger level, I see, and that's why, again, I strongly believe in terms of planning, that we need to look at the macro level in terms of the bigger picture, where the government comes in and provides that long-term strategy and the plan for it. At the micro level, I would see several actors trying to play, including the water utilities. In Kenya, it's devolved. The water utilities are devolved. So like in the county government of Nakuru, we own 3 companies. Those are the 3 water utilities. So at that level, then the responsibility gets more decentralized to the actors on the ground. But overall, I think the government has a bigger role really to play.
Maybe I would ask Faustina if you can tell us that. What do you think about it? And can I ask the control room to switch off this slide and bring the first slide, maybe? Just.
Thank you. Just
Yeah,
as David said, we are all responsible to address the basic rights of water and sanitation. But from where I am coming from, I believe that utilities have a bigger role because water utilities have the mandate. They have been given the mandate by government to deliver these services. But often utilities will look at those who can pay for the service and ignore those who do not have the wherewithal or the income to be able to afford the tariffs that they give. But I believe we have come to this level because government in Ghana, government takes care of the initial investment. If you look at the building of treatment plants, it is usually funded by government. Governments will fund transmission means, but when it comes to the distribution and then the service means, then government says, well, householders should pay for it. And utilities will certainly extend the service to householders that can pay for even when it comes to the distribution means, sometimes the utility pays for it, but then part of the cost is paid by householders. But the service fee or the tertiary means is fully financed by householders. So for householders that are willing and able, the utility doesn't have any qualms about that. The connection will be extended. But for those who cannot afford the new service connection fee, that is where the challenge is. And so why don't we make it such that new service connection fees are removed? That is, if utilities are financially viable to do that. But we can only reach that stage with support of government. In Ghana, for example, even where we receive grants, the ministry will say they will unlend it to the utility as a loan. But we don't charge economic tariffs. Where will we get the money to be able to pay for loans, for example, when we are barely covering our operational expenses? So utilities have a bigger role in here, but then we need government support. We need the support of stakeholders. We also need to build our capacity. We need to see what is happening in other places to be able to do what we are doing. Because for Ghana Water, we are extending services to low-income areas because of what we learned from VEI, because of what we saw in Kenya, what we saw in Zambia and Uganda. Then we took it back home. So capacity building too is important, but the issue of investment will need to be looked at.
I would like to ask from regulators' point of view, Julia, what is your understanding, if you can take this question, who is responsible for providing water and sanitation services for low-income settlements and informal areas from regulatory point of view, because that's interesting to hear from you.
De hecho, el Estado es el primer responsable de llevar este importante recurso a las poblaciones más vulnerables, con una corresponsabilidad de los mismos beneficiarios que están organizados a través de distintos comités y grupos poblacionales, porque en latitudes como la nuestra, como en Perú, en Lima, se ve que el beneficiario, o sea, las poblaciones beneficiadas a veces también tienen ciertas conductas que son irregulares, como por ejemplo hacer derivaciones no autorizadas de estos puntos de agua para poder tener un mejor abastecimiento. Y de esta manera nosotros como empresa perdemos el control de este recurso y también, lógicamente, llega a pocas personas. Entonces hay una corresponsabilidad entre el Estado y la sociedad beneficiaria, ¿no?
Okay. So I would like to jump upon the other question, which is basically I have is that we had good learnings from today's discussions as well as the first meeting at IWA that there is the urban development and the water and sanitation service interface. So Edda, would you like to tell us that what is the role of urban planning to accelerate the achievement of SDG 6? How can urban planning help us? Do you want to give us a brief one, but I would say? Yeah.
Yes, I think the integration of economic planning and spatial
Urban
planning.
planning, I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, but when we do the urban planning, it's a lot of it is driven by economic issues and economic planning. And I think there's a lack of integration until the spatial planning.
Okay.
And the connections between the different actors in the city, all the institutions, they should be really given priority. And another thing I would like to also emphasize is the financing gap that you also mentioned, that this requires funding, and if it's not supported by government level, by city top level, then it'll be very difficult to have this acceleration of improvements that we so sorely need.
So before I go back to other panelists who have not spoken, David, would you like to tell us, because you are an architect and urban planner, in this group of people largely, I think not many people are from that background, they are largely engineers and civil engineer, mechanical engineer law. So what do you think is this? Why are we talking that there is interface? Urban planning is a statutory public process,
I think, and I fully agree with the economic planners, because then we need the capital and we need the money to do it. But again, I think we need to realize and go to the starting point, the basics. And that's where utilities find it a bit difficult in terms of connecting the pipes. The spatial plan of the area should be a priority, because then it guides the milestones that we are setting to be able to make, clear investment. Because then we invest in, how do you base your investment? The biggest challenge we have had over time, and I think I need to repeat this, is that most governments and agencies are driven by economic planning. We have $1 billion, let's spend it. How? And then we start distributing that. Yeah, instead of us looking like we have the space we need to develop, whether it's a city or a municipality or a country, what is it that we need to do on that space? And then based on that, then we can start allocating the resources available and doing the optimal in terms of the priority, because we might not do the coverage. For instance, and I think this is clear, looking at, and I'm sure from Ghana, your visit to Nairobi, Kampala, and Dar es Salaam, and other places. We have a whole chunk of slums. In Nairobi alone, I think 60% of the city dwellers live in the informal settlements. That's the slums of Nairobi. But the realities are, what is it that we are doing apart from firefighting, going back to the slums and trying to connect pipes here. The next thing, we are doing a highway and we have to cut all these pipes, it's because of clear lack of spatial planning. And I think that's the basis that the utilities need to pick from, so that as you implement, the highways will also be accommodated. The next phase of human settlement, to avoid another slum developing and another one developing as we do firefighting from behind, how is it that we need to plan ahead? Yeah. And I think that's the basis of spatial planning that need to guide city management. So
I would like to take, Patrick, what do you think in Uganda about, is there, what is your understanding about urban planning and water and sanitation? I think it should be on.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. What I should say is that looking at the context of Uganda and the UN development goals, all nations, looking at the nations in the global north and then the global south, are committed to the SDG 6 without setting any limits. We all have one common goal. And what did that imply at that time? It implied that we have to look in the direction of jointly working together not to reinvent the wheels, but rather to look in the context of, say, like the WOPs that we are running right now, where we, all countries can work closely to ensure that they are able to meet this SDG 6. It's very clear, even from the discussions all together, that we cannot use the same thinking to solve the problems. We cannot use the same thinking to solve the problems we created. And that's why from our country, Uganda, it started from the policy level where they decided to reinvent the way we are managing our systems in a way of sustainability, and they also focused on not only in the urban areas, but also looking at the rural growth centers and communities to have those piped water and sanitation services managed effectively and sustainably.
Okay, thank you. So, Rob, the final 30-second one, the reply. So what is your take with your rich experience of over 3 decades, how does this interface?
God, I feel old. And I'm a microbiologist, so I'm the least qualified person in the room to talk about planning. I think the interesting point for me, just picking up the other points, is I agree completely, spatial planning is incredibly important, but for me, fundamentally, what this is about is how do citizens engage with services and to plan on that basis. And if you start from that point of view, suddenly you open up a whole range of possibilities that perhaps aren't available when you think along more traditional constrained policy lines. And the one thing we're talking about, like in water aid at the moment, is formalisation. So I think Carla picked up on this yesterday when he talked about that kind of decentralisation agenda. Well, how can you manage that, the formalisation of currently informal services? Because people are receiving services, they're paying too much for them, but they are getting them. How can you bring those services under a formally mandated umbrella without necessarily having to think about, well, I've got to extend my network, or it's all got to be driven from the centre outwards. So that more distributed model of service delivery and planning for that and recognising it's going to change over time. So how do those management models flex? I think that's got to be brought into the planning environment.
But I would also, being myself a trained planner by training, I would say that I think there are different scales at which we talk about the planning, whether it is whether we are talking about local area plans which should feed into a city level plan, and then these local areas plan. So it is not top down, but it is bottom up also. So I think that integration of that should happen, and certainly there is a role and responsibility of water and sanitation providers, but if these local area plans feed into a city level plan, I think then we can have some, and interventions are done at different scale. I would say I think this is a strong message which I wanted to say, that there is a linkage, but certainly planning and water in big cities will be important, but in smaller towns and cities where there is no planning at the moment, there will be local area plans which are required, as well as water and sanitation plans. I'm aware of that. There is a next session which is starting at 3, so I'm already overshot with time. So I would like to close this session, but also to I'd like to show you the last slide. I'm sorry. I would like to say that we would take this discussion forward, and we intend to have some sessions which we will discuss this further, and with various case studies at IWA Global Water and Development Congress at Kigali. We would like to invite all of you, and I would say thank you to all the conveners of this session, UN Habitat, and also the participants online, as well as who are attending in person. Thank you very much for joining, and we had a very interesting, thanks to the panelists for joining. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm sorry for the other group who is waiting outside. I think I'm 5 minutes delayed. So, thank you very much. Thank you.